everybody and welcome back to my channel. My name is Lucy and I'm a second year English literature PhD student at the University of Birmingham, and today I want to talk all about the mid-year review. Now the reason I want to talk about this is because I have had a few questions from people over the year that I've been doing the PhD about, like, what is a mid-year review? What is kind of the progress step? At Birmingham it's called a mid-year review. Obviously I can only talk about my experience at Birmingham, but now I've done it once in my first year. I thought this would be a great chance to talk you through the process from start to finish from someone who's done it. So let's get on with the video. So I suppose the first thing I should say is that the mid-year review is what Birmingham calls the kind of panel that you have to sit in front of to say whether you are ready to progress or continue your PhD. This is typically something that happens within the first 6 months of your PhD, and you will get an email inviting you or telling you about the panel in January time. And the panels at Birmingham take place in June, so you've got the timeline. Now, I think the thing that should be emphasised, and the thing that the university themselves emphasise throughout this whole process, is this is not a viva, this is not a practice viva. You are not being judged on the quality of your academic argument, of your academic credentials and all that kind of stuff. What they are assessing is this person working at PhD level? Is this person showing the potential to produce a thesis? Is this person where we would expect a person to be at 6 months? They take that into account. They're not expecting finished products, they're not expecting finished works. They want to see that you are developing in the correct way. And partly they want to make sure you're getting on well with your supervisor. This is the other thing. This is to make sure that as a team, you guys are working together well, that your supervisory team and you are getting along, and that progress is being made between you. Do not stress about the mid-year review. You will know beforehand, or you should, if you are communicating well with your supervisors, whether you are progressing enough, whether you are progressing to the point where they would like, whether you are producing work they are happy with. If you are, and you've had no issues, you will breeze through the mid-year review. It is honestly nothing to worry about. If there's been a few teething problems, you might find it a bit harder, or there might be some concerns raised. But again, in general, this is something your supervisor ideally will have flagged with you beforehand, so you won't go into this completely unknown. So now I've kind of hopefully set your mind at ease a bit. What is the actual process of the mid-year review? What do you actually end up doing at UOB? So the first thing you have to do is you will need to fill in a form. And I kid you not, I completely dropped the ball on this and didn't realise there was a form until I was sitting with a group of friends at the pub who were also PhD students, and they started talking about this form that was due that night at midnight. And I was like, what form? What form do I need to fill in? So I, by this point, was already a bit drunk and was like, I haven't even started this form. I got one of my friends to send me the link. He then left to go do the form at his house. I literally got my laptop out the pub and did it in about 15 minutes. Now, I'm not saying that's how you should do it, but that kind of shows you that this isn't something you need to stress about, hopefully. I was able to do it partly in 15 minutes because a lot of the questions they asked were similar to funding application questions that I had just done. So I transferred a lot of it and it seemed to work fine. What that form is basically, I think you have to give like a summary of what your project is. You need to say what your title is. I don't remember there being that many compulsory questions. This is the other thing, that form had a lot of optional questions. I didn't do any of them. It was never flagged, no one cared. So just do the required questions. Don't stress yourself out about it. That form is more for admin stuff than anything else. So once you've submitted that form, you will then probably talk with your supervisors about what work you are going to submit for your mid-year review. And if memory serves me, this is typically between 8,000 to 10,000 words that you want to submit. Pretty sure that's what I submitted. Maybe 8,000 as a cap, but it's not a huge amount. It also doesn't have to be one continuous piece of writing. I'm actually going to share and talk you through the writing example that I submitted for my mid-year review so that you have an idea. So this is my mid-year review, and as you can see, it's 8,191 words long, which makes me think 8,000 probably was the length rather than 10,000, and it includes any works I have cited. So the actual, I suppose, written content in terms of excluding the bibliography, is probably a little bit below 8,000. And what I'm going to do here is quickly just walk you through it, not obviously what I've written, but kind of how I've laid it out. So mid-year review writing submission, I put a little very short sentence explaining where this is going to be from and kind of the context of this, so that the people who are marking it have a better idea of what they're reading. And then, this is just a chunk of text on kind of the history of queer romances. It's not everything I'd written at this point, but it was just a little bit of text that I'd written so they could have an idea of what I've been working on and kind of the direction my thesis is taking. As you can see, it is cited correctly. It is formatted like you would format an essay, most likely, using footnotes, using the correct citations, which I've shown you how I've done before. And that was one section of my submission. And then if we scroll further down, as I said before, I kind of did 2 in 1, and that's perfectly fine. But again, I've just highlighted what this is, and I'm saying this is a case study, and that, again, the context of what the next section is. So it's very clearly marked to them, so it's easier for them to understand. And this was something my supervisors recommended I do. Again, this is fully footnoted. And, this is something that my supervisors looked over to make sure it is up to kind of the academic standard required. But it is also something that I was working on before, and I didn't specially write for the mid-year review, and I think that's important to emphasise and remember. So each piece of these works was between 3,000 and 4,000, so then together with the bibliography you get to the 8,000 needed. So hopefully seeing my writing example will set your mind at ease and show you that it's not that tricky, and ultimately you probably will already have some pieces of writing that you've worked on before, like I had, that you can use for it. Now, the other thing you submit along with your mid-year review before the panel, and I'm pretty sure the submission date for this is April, May time, like late April, early May, is you also want to submit a plan of your thesis. And this is probably what I spent the most time with. So if you watched my video last week, you can see I was talking about structuring a thesis. And in that I mentioned that it is around the mid-year review that you will start to firm up an idea of your structure, because you are asked for one, pretty much. And basically in this, again, you give an overall abstract, you give the title. Again, I copied those from funding and edited them slightly because I'd already had to kind of give an outline of my thesis funding application. So reduce the work on yourself, regurgitate that stuff. Trust me, you can do it a lot and it saves a lot of time. Unless obviously your project has significantly changed from when you applied for that funding, but mine has not so far. And then the other thing you need to do is you will need to give chapter outlines and a summary for each chapter. And I'm also going to talk you through what mine look like so you can have a good idea of sort of the length and what they expect. Thesis structure, chapter plan, and bibliography. Now, the thesis title you should already know. The outline, as I said before, you start by giving a very brief outline or abstract. I already had some of this from the various funding applications I had done. You might have a similar thing, just rework it. So there is a word limit for this. It's about 300 words. As I said before, I adapted this, restructured it slightly from previous funding applications, so I did not write this completely fresh because my project hasn't changed significantly enough, and I don't see the point in doing additional work if you don't need to. And then, like I said, probably the main bit you're going to spend the most time on, or at least the bit I spent the most time on, was thinking about your chapter plans and how you're actually going to structure it from a chapter perspective. So I've got the history of queer romances, and then a very brief kind of paragraph saying what I'm going to cover in this chapter, what are the kind of important things, and how I'm going to go about doing it. So you can see here I say I'm defining key terms, I'm looking at the history, I'm bringing in my data, my interviews, etc. And I've got the queer body, found family, and queering the happily ever after. And as I said in my video last week, I did start off by having 5 chapters, but as my process has evolved, as you can see, this says thesis outline v.2. So this did change after I submitted it originally. So this isn't exactly what I submitted, but it hasn't changed in terms of what I've done. And then it's a selected bibliography. This is not everything I'd read in the first 6 months, but this is kind of the key critics, people I felt was important to mention, and things like that. The final thing I'm going to show you is just the reader report that you get. So this is a report that you will get, I believe, 24 or 48 hours before your first session. And pretty much this is just feedback on those 2 pieces I've submitted. So you can see you have a first marker and a secondary marker. They just give you some feedback. They tell you maybe some areas to think about, areas of concern. There you go. And things they were interested in and think might be helpful. And again, all very positive. My secondary marker, I think, didn't do anything. I think that's quite normal. I think the secondary marker only does something maybe if the first marker has major areas of concern or they massively disagree with the first marker. But as you can see, it's all very positive. Overall, I was delighted to read this, and it's a very promising start to a fascinating project. So that is just to give you an idea of kind of the type of feedback you will get before the meeting. So now you've seen both things that I submitted for my mid-year review, and the only thing really left to tell you is what was the actual review panel like. And I think for a lot of people this is the scariest bit, because this is the unknown bit, because often the work you've submitted, the chapter outline you submitted before, you'll have shown to your supervisors, other people have seen it. Obviously you can spend a lot of time making sure you're happy with it and crafting it to kind of your standards. But the review panel is a bit more unknown. It's obviously a bit scary, it's a bit interviewy, and it's harder to prepare. And I think the other thing I should mention is I obviously did my mid-year review during COVID, so it was completely online, and I know that this year again they're going to be online for first years. Second years do not have to take a mid-year review unless they opt to. I probably won't be opting to because I don't think I need to. I do still have to submit the form, however. So if your mid-year review is online, don't worry, mine was, it was completely fine, the process worked really well. Basically what happens is you will get an email a couple of weeks beforehand telling you when your mid-year review is scheduled for, and also I believe in that it says who is going to be sitting on your panel. Now the people who sit on your panel, there are 2 people who are there to kind of ask you questions about the work you submitted, about your PhD process so far, and they will be professors within your department who you have never, well, you might have interacted with them, but they are not in your field of interest. So I think I had a Shakespeare person on mine, and then someone who did Victorian literature. So not people I would have necessarily interacted with in my kind of contemporary popular romance field. So for mine, I had 2 people, and they were the 2 asking questions, and then you will have a third person. So for me, that was Simon, who I think he was on everybody's, and his job is basically to be there as the sort of official recorder as such. So he doesn't ask the questions, but he's sort of making sure that the process is fair. He takes the notes. He's the kind of more official, like filling in the forms person, and he does interact with you and talk through you, and he sort of explains the process. I'm pretty sure he did anyway. As I said, this was over a year ago. Well, no, this was back in June, so my memory is a little hazy of the exact interview. But what I do remember is I got asked about 2-3 questions, and they were really nice questions. They were questions like, so you're looking to do data, how do you envision that going? Do you think that will be, how do you think that will be impacted? Or it was things like, oh, we can see that you're really involved and that you've got really, you set up a lot of things to help with the PGR community. How are you managing that workload and things like that? They were not hard questions. They weren't asking questions about my research. They weren't questioning why I do certain critics or picking up on minute details I'd put in the work I proposed. This was very much questions about my overall experience, how I was finding it, how was I coping, how was I managing the workload, did I feel supported, did I feel connected to the department. It was more about checking in with my overall experience rather than quizzing me academically on my PhD. And I think that's something that's really important to remember. And that's why I would say this is more of a conversation, because let's say you have had a negative experience with one of your supervisors, or you've had issues with someone else in the department for some reason. This is your time to say, oh, there was kind of this and I'm not really sure and I'm struggling in this aspect. Because although we don't always want to reveal when we're struggling, I think if it's something you've raised and your supervisors haven't really picked up on it, or it's kind of been brushed aside, these are the people you could go to. And this is kind of your last chance to say something, really, because, you know, they are there to support you and to check how you're doing. So be honest if you are struggling. I only had good things to say, so I didn't say anything. But I know some people did raise minor issues they maybe had, or, you know, they felt like maybe some of their supervisors weren't being as present as they could be, and they raised that. So do keep that in mind when you're having the review panel. Yeah, so then it gets rounded up. To be honest, I came out of my review panel feeling so good and feeling really on top of the world, because they said loads of complimentary things. They basically said I was doing a fantastic job, and it was really lovely to have 3 people say that who obviously didn't know me and didn't need to say that from a perspective of, you know, oh, she's our supervisory and we want to make her feel good. No, these people had no reason to be so complimentary, and they were so nice and so lovely. And then that gets written up. I got an email afterwards and I got a written report, and that gets, I think, sent to like my official, you know, behind the scenes student admin stuff. And that's pretty much the mid-year review. I think then I had a brief conversation with Amy and Deborah in my next supervisor meeting. They were like, yep, you passed, great, move on. So I'm hoping this video will have set your mind at ease and show you that it's not that stressful. You will already be working towards it without even knowing, because you'll already have done writing, you'll already be starting to think about your structure, and don't stress about it. Just, it's all good. It's all good. And yeah, if you have any questions about the process, whether you want to put them down below or send me a DM, always happy to answer, and I will see you next Sunday. Bye.